Well, recession economics, many of you, most of you, yours truly included, knows what it's done. Really eating less caviar and foie gras and Wagyu beef lately, kind of reeling back a little bit and a little bit of self-imposed austerity. I mean, who in the heck knows what's going to happen next out there, and you do want to save something for a rainy day. Our next guest on the program on Age Confidential says the recession has in many ways an unintended positive effect on the whole concept of building design and civil contracting, and says that building activity these days concentrated more in emerging economies, China, India, and the Mideast than, of course, the U.S., where foreclosure signs dot the landscape. Paul Katz is president of international architecture practice, Kohn, Pedersen, Fox Associates. Also, and, of course, Mark Matthews as well on the show with us here. Hello, Paul. Welcome to the show.
How are you?
How can bad times, how can rough economies have a positive impact on the way we build the things that house us and that surround us?
Well, the design of cities and buildings require a much longer perspective than most other businesses. And I think in the recent years, we were planning and building too quickly, and much faster than any pace in the past history. Mm-hmm. And I would dare say that some of the design and construction was a little irresponsible. So now we have a little bit more time to plan for the future.
Mm-hmm. And what does the future look like? Are we going back? Are we going to the days of drab, civil service designed, boring, innocuous kind of, just dull, drab buildings, or what?
No, I don't think so. I think for example, one of the activities that we were recently talking about was to renovate older buildings, more heritage buildings, rather than taking them down to build larger projects. So maybe the scale of projects are going to be smaller. Maybe there's going to be more variety. Mm-hmm. Some of that might be building a better future. Mm-hmm.
What are the trends right now going on? I mean, we're right here in Hong Kong. Right. I mean, the three of us can look across and we can see it looks like they're almost ready to top out the ICC. It's been in construction for so long. By the way, I'm looking forward to the Ritz Club on the 118th floor when that comes around, by the way. But urban, there's a lot of talk about the canyon effect, about the lack of circulation, and yet you get a lot of efficiencies with so-called vertical cities, and that's been sort of the trend. That's maybe one of them. Roppongi in Tokyo is another. Is that the wave of the future, or are we going to kind of reverse back and go toward maybe going out into the sticks and the whole suburbanization move from a generation ago?
Well, I think personally, and our company believes that sprawl is one of the most difficult problems we face in particularly emerging markets. And of course, in the United States, we've had sprawl for many years, and that's a huge user of energy that we feel that tall buildings and compact cities work against, so that we believe that you can live more efficiently, and the tall building and the density allows for a kind of lifestyle much more suited to what we should look forward to in the future.
Yeah, if Mark wants to get involved in this.
I always thought that any building that sort of got over 30, 40 stories because of the elevators was less economical. And so has technology changed? I always thought the tall buildings were just sort of trophies.
Yes, okay. Well, I think if you look at a building, compare two buildings individually, a building that's twice the height, if you compare a 50-story building to a 100-story building, of course a 100-story building requires about 50% more investment in the structure. But when you look at building at systems or neighborhoods, if you get a compact neighborhood and look at a cluster of buildings together, then you're saving in other things like infrastructure. You have a higher reliance and usage of public transportation. People walk between buildings. So if you imagine New York City and the density in New York City, it's actually very efficient and economical. Now, one of the difficulties we've had is that many people plan too many tall buildings together, and they see tall buildings in isolation rather than tall buildings in combination with medium-rise and low buildings. You need the variety. If it's all tall buildings, it's no good. If it's all low buildings, I don't think that's a particularly exciting place.
We were talking earlier with one of the South Korean presidential committee heads, for the Go Green initiative. And they just announced several days ago they're going to be spending like $80–90 billion to green up. How has this renewed focus on greening. And here in Hong Kong, we have to pay for plastic bags, God forbid. All of a sudden, now how is that?
Everybody else does, by the way. We're way behind.
No, other people are using paper bags, by the way, which we could, renewables. But how is that impacting the trade? I had a very nice lunch in a green restaurant the other day, which used recycled materials from top to bottom. I was going, this is kind of cozy, actually.
Well, I think one of the things we're thinking of rethinking our priorities, and there is going to be a need of change of lifestyle in general, and I think people are actually looking forward to it. After years of increasing wealth and expenditure, there's an aesthetic and in fact an appeal to using less. And
how is the industry faring with this? I mean, in tight times, obviously, when you're pitching, when you're when you're bringing proposals, and it's very expensive to come up with one too. You've got huge numbers of staff. You got to come up with 3D, holographic imaging and all kinds of things. And and the end user, the client, is becoming more and more demanding, and they want more bang for the buck. What is that doing to the architecture industry?
Well, it's obviously more competitive. You have to work harder to win projects. But on the other hand, one can say that people are more careful on who they select because they're thinking more carefully about who they're hiring. So one likes to think they'll pick people because they're better, and they'll gravitate to quality firms rather than the cheapest firm.
Right. Earlier when we introduced you, we mentioned emerging economies, Middle East, China, India, really the sort of the buzzing ground for you.
And those are countries that really need buildings. They need all sorts of buildings. They need public transportation, and they are looking to join the rest of the world and enrich their lifestyles.
What do you think about Dubai? That seems to be way over the top.
Well, Dubai, I think the biggest problem with Dubai is there was a lack of a master plan. That there was too much focus on the objects and not the spaces between the buildings. And the most important thing is not to focus necessarily on the height of the building, but to focus on what it's like between the buildings and the ground floor area. What happens to the gardens, the parks, the public space, the commonwealth, which Singapore actually does so well, and it's such a great model. So that you've lived in Singapore, you mentioned earlier, and I think it's one of the best planned cities for the individual.
Paul, thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
I think all good things do have to come to an end. Appreciate your time.
Okay,
Mark.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching AC, and thanks for all your feedback. And Natsumi, I hope you got a good answer from Mark here. Open economy, it can bring you great kudos, but there is also a price to pay often. By the way, we want to keep hearing from you. Remember our email handle, asiaconf@bloomberg.net. You can send us stuff anytime. We'll bring it up as appropriate.